This is the Retirement Planning University podcast with Jordan Schwartz and Phillis Pulvinas.
Welcome. I am your host, Jordan Schwartz, and today I'm here with my co-host, and we're talking about a big topic today. Big topic a lot of people are making mistakes on. What do we got, Phil?
We are going to talk about how to choose a financial advisor.
So what's so interesting to me is, when you think about retirement planning, there's really one of the biggest things that I think a lot of people need to be aware of. Having an advisor in your 20s and 30s and 40s, it doesn't make as big of a difference, right? Because when you're in your 20s and 30s and 40s, your job is simple. Build a pile of money as big as you possibly can, right? Be risky, be in the market, try to do tax-free investing, build up an emergency fund. But what happens is when you start getting closer towards retirement, that's where it becomes a lot more complex. So we wanted to kind of distill and break down just 6 of the, I think, the most important criteria we should be looking at for determining how to choose an advisor.
Yeah, and the first one that I think we should discuss is, you need an independent advisor. You need somebody who is not kowtowing to one of the big names, the big banks or the big brokerage houses where they have a menu. Maybe it's a little broader than it used to be of investment products because you're going to pay with fees and the advice is going to be tainted. You want someone who can really answer to you and have the entire universe of investment vehicles and options at their fingertips to sit with you and build a plan based upon what I call your financial DNA. Everybody's got their own DNA when it comes to what they need the money to do.
So what's happening basically then is if you think about it, there's 2 types, right? There's the independent and then there's the captive advisor. And the captive advisor is generally the big institutions whose names are on the side of big stadiums and buildings. And to your point, what happens is when you walk into that room, they already kind of know what it is they're going to recommend to you. Now, those investments might be suitable, they may be okay, but depending on where you go, you're going to get a narrower preset menu of offerings and investments. And when that happens, to your point, Phyllis, you have the typical issues of high fees in the portfolio, or oftentimes high fees. You've got the issue of being recommended mutual funds that underperform the indexes 80% of the time. And then you got the lack.
That blows my mind. 80%, say that again.
No,
so
80%, so 80% of the time, it's like 82%, somewhere around there. But like over I think it's a 16-year period of time, 80% of the time, mutual funds do less than the indexes they're designed to beat. There's more mutual funds than there are individual stocks, right? It's how they're packaging those investments. But what's wild to me too, not just with the mutual funds, it's the lack of investment choices. The majority of people who we meet with, their portfolios have 3 primary tools: cash, bond funds, stock funds, or a target date fund, which is like a 2020, 2030, 2040 fund, which is a combination of stock funds and bond funds. And maybe the best way to do it, Phyllis, would be just breaking down what are some of the danger zones, just keeping it simple, of a captive advisor, why we'd want to be with an independent advisor.
Yeah, one of the danger zones are, first of all, is the limited capacity of investment tools that they can offer. Really, maybe they really believe those are best, but boy, when you just have stock funds, bond funds, and cash, unless you know the market's going to continue to go up and interest rates are going to stay low or go lower, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. So if those are the only tools, that is a huge recipe for disaster in retirement. You need so many other.
And maybe the easiest way to look at it would be, I kind of have this picture in my head of people sitting in a big corner office in a big glass building, and they're basically just choosing, what are we going to sell to people? What are the products we package? And it's the problem is, and I think number 1 and number 2 kind of bleed into one another, is the second criteria is the fiduciary. Now, that's the type of advisor who does what's in the client's best ethical, legal, and moral best interest, right? Attorneys are fiduciaries. Accountants are fiduciaries. I know the physicians take Hippocratic oaths, but I think they're also in that capacity fiduciaries. But, up until recently, all advisors weren't required to even be fiduciaries.
Yeah, this is just bonkers. The SEC just watered down the whole definition. And what it really comes down to is the poor client, along with all the prospectuses they get that they never read and never understand, now have all this disclosure stuff about being a fiduciary, which they never read, never understand. And the bottom line is, are they actually fiduciaries or not? A fiduciary to me is someone who breaks it down to you, has all the tools available for you to pick and choose what's right in your situation with you and educate you along the way.
Well, what about this then? So during the Obama administration, he tried to pass the fiduciary law, and through the Department of Labor, where all advisors were act as fiduciaries. Now, during the Trump administration, they picked it up, but they went through the SEC. And there's obviously a lot of red tape with all that. But my interpretation is, to your point, Phil, they watered down the definition of what it means to be a fiduciary. Right now, all advisors, they say they're doing what's best for you, but now there's more disclosure. We haven't necessarily seen the actual business activities change. And that's where the issue lives, is the people who were saying they weren't fiduciaries before, who were saying they are fiduciaries now, they're selling the same stuff.
Same thing.
That they were before.
Stuff.
Exactly. That's what's bananas.
More stuff to read. Yeah. It just blows my mind. Mm-hmm. And how the average person could ever figure out what's really going on. Mm-hmm. It's sad.
I agree.
I'm just going to say one thing. Most people grow up thinking, oh, if I got a big name company, the J.P. Morgan, or I shouldn't throw out names, Morgan, whatever the heck the big names are, well, they got a lot behind them and they're the way to go. And that's almost for some affluent people, it's almost a badge of honor to be with these groups and getting the best. That ain't always the case.
What about this? Because this is a great thought, Phils. So a lot of people will say, I'm going with the big institution. Where I would go to is, why are they wanting to go with the big institution? Let's think about what the narrative is with these bigger institutions. One, those institutions are not going under. Your money's going to be safe there, which I agree with that. Working with a well-known, reputable, what's called an investment custodian, obviously we should be doing that.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I think what's happening though, in the last, what would you say? I mean, you've been in the industry. I know you're not a day past 35, but you've been in the industry for a little while. And I think what's happened over the last 10 to 15 years is what worked 20, 30, 40 years ago just really isn't working as well today. And there's that misconception with those institutions that you go with them, they're the best. I really wouldn't say they are the best anymore.
I'd say they're opposite of the best. I mean, you can't generalize everybody within there, but by and large, when someone comes in and they're with one of the big names, I'm going to find fees in that portfolio. I'm going to find risk that's out of alignment with where the client needs it. I'm going to find lack of tax planning. I'm going to find lack of holistic planning for people who are within 10 years of retirement or already retired. And that to me is not a fiduciary. Sorry.
So think about this.
Yeah.
I love that. So think about this. I like to marry one with the two, the independent fiduciary. That way, not only they're not captive, but they're also doing what's best for you. Here's how I think this kind of plays out. So this is cool. So think about this. Phillis, what car company has disrupted the automobile industry over the last decade?
Tesla.
Okay. What is the number one thing that has disrupted commercial real estate? Zoom, right?
You're right. Yeah, absolutely.
During the pandemic for our clients, I was on the laptop in my basement for 2 years talking to clients. I didn't have to wear any shoes. It was wonderful. What I think is happening
the only thing that came out. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. What I think is happening right now is you're seeing independent fiduciaries disrupting financial services like a Tesla did for the automobile industry or Zoom did to the commercial real estate industry. The exact same thing is taking place because a lot of these older legacy companies, they're not adapting to the times. And in this postmodern economic world, we have got to adapt to the times. So I like the independent fiduciary. This third one, I love this one.
Yeah, distribution specialists versus the accumulation specialist. Now, this is really, I mean, for the distribution specialist, why you have to have independent and the fiduciary. To your point before, when you're young, with time aside, if all you do is grow your money, even if you pay a little bit more, even if you get hit ups and downs, you're buying through it, even if you're not as tax efficient, you've got lots of years to that. But boy, there's a big problem if you get it right at this stage, when what you have is what you got. When you're not working, paycheck is going to be stopping soon, or it's already stopped. Everything, all the rules, the tools, everything changes. I think, that's why I'll probably take it out kicking and screaming, Jordan. I think that memo does not get out looking up. I am going to continue to scream that there's a big distinction until the day they pull me out of the office.
Well, like you just said, the rules and the tools are different. So it's a perfect example, because I know, too, you got into the industry based off of family members needing help. I got into the industry. My mom taught home ec for 30 years. My dad had a small arcade game business. They were brilliant at what they did. However, this stuff wasn't necessarily their cup of tea. And for me, what my goal was, I wanted to learn it so I could teach it to other people and help them with it. And I look at it like this: accumulation phase. To your point, we're building a pile of money. Our job is simple. Get the pile of money as big as you possibly can. What happens, though, is that at a certain point, usually, what do you think? Probably 10, maybe 15, 5 to 15 years from retirement, when you say for the distribution?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's when we're kind of hitting the distribution phase. That's when not only is the pile of money we're not putting money into it anymore, money's coming out of it to support and sustain our lifestyle.
I want to add one point, that the 15 years with Social Security being tenuous for younger people, with most younger people not having pensions, used to be you could get within 10 years and start planning. 15 years is not a bad idea. Certainly 10 years. Absolutely. Just wanted to add that.
I agree with you. I love that. And with that distribution specialist, what's happening, if you look at I think it's 20,000 people every day in America retire. It's something like that, isn't it?
It's a lot of people.
I think it's more now. I think it's more now. But, the average population, 20,000 people a day are retiring. You look at some of our older generations, that's a lot of our population, not just in the States, but globally. Absolutely. So what you're seeing is that a lot of people have started moving into this distribution phase, but their investment strategy doesn't reflect
not change
that they're in the distribution phase, what happens when you do that?
Oh my goodness, things can implode when that doesn't change, and all of a sudden the market goes down or inflation goes up. You've got to make the changes. I mean, really, that's a recipe for disaster. That's why people go back to work. That's why they have to work longer. That's why they have to downscale what they're living on. And most times, Jordan, I don't know if you agree with me, but most times hardworking people have saved enough to have a great retirement if they just do the planning right.
I totally agree with you. What is it? I think 2 in 3 Americans don't retire successfully. I would argue, though, more than 2 in 3, 2 out of the 3 could retire successfully in retirement.
That's what gets me.
That's the problem, too, where it's a few things. So number one, I think the difference, what's the difference between a distribution versus an accumulation specialist? I think number one, it's managing risk in someone's portfolio. Right? When you lose significant amounts of money early into retirement, that'll destroy your retirement. But the second thing, and probably the more valuable, is our item number 4, which is holistic planning. Very few people, I think, even know what this is because so few advisors do it effectively.
Oh, my goodness. This is such an important piece. It's one thing to focus on the tools. And yes, you do have to focus on the tools. And yes, they're different from what you've done up to that point. You got to reschool yourself, if you will. You've got to have a more diversified portfolio with different tools, not just a lot of stock funds or a lot of mutual funds. We can have a whole top conversation on that one. But the investments have got to be right. But the holistic planning, the planning around that, if you don't get tax planning right, sure, you make a lot of money on paper inside of your retirement account to give it back to Uncle Sam. You're not keeping much of it. Bragging rights, ridiculous. If you don't get Social Security done right, wring out every dollar and cent from Social Security. By the way, it's not an entitlement. You paid into it. For goodness sakes, that can be a big issue. How about healthcare planning? If you don't have a plan where your money is leveraged to protect you in the event of catastrophic illness or a lot of healthcare costs, if you don't get your Medicare supplement right, that takes away that hard-earned money. That costs you so much money. And I don't know, inflation, it never sleeps. It doesn't. Even when it's low, it never sleeps. If you don't have an inflation-adjusted plan, somebody, an income plan that adjusts for inflation, you don't know where to take the money from when. That is a huge issue. So the planning around the actual investment strategy, I'd say it might even be more important.
So what about this?
What do you think?
An analogy that I like is most advisors, most people who do their own investments, they focus primarily on the financial house. Now, you need a good financial house because if you don't have a good financial house, it's going to collapse. What so many people forget to do is they put a fence. They forget to put a fence around the financial house. Exactly. And that's what holistic planning is, right? It's tax conversion planning, long-term care, Social Security, Medicare, comprehensive income planning. To your point, planning against things like inflation, or the average American, I think, is probably going to live longer in the future with modern medicine, and very well could. All those different types of things, someone's not planning for it. Or Phyllis, if you were in New York at JFK and you're flying to Los Angeles, LAX, and your flight pattern is off 1 degree to the north from start to finish, where's your flight ending up?
It's not ending up at LAX.
Canada. Canada. Yeah. Right. So we think about this. If we don't have air traffic control for our retirement, which I'd call holistic planning, how the heck are we going to plan for a successful retirement? And this is where so many people are like, why didn't it go right? What happened wrong? Your point, inflation. What is it roughly? If you look at the 100-year rate of inflation, it takes about 20 years for your expenses to double. Right? If you don't plan for that and you need $6,000 a month today or $10,000 a month today, 20 years from now, that's $12,000 or $20,000 a month. Of course, you're going to run out of money if you don't plan for something like that. And this is where a lot of these big firms, they don't want to do the planning because the planning doesn't align with charging fees on assets under management and building as big of an institution as possible.
Oh, don't get me started on the Monte Carlos.
How about that? Let's get started on it. What's the problem with those?
Goodness, the Monte Carlos. When I see that, you get a 95% probability of being successful. Well, I'm sorry, I got to answer to those people at that 5%.
Yeah, what's the 5%?
What about that? Yeah, what about that? It's just like getting on a plane and the pilot says, as you're seatbelting up, I got great news for you. We got a 95% chance that we're going to land successfly. You're running for the doors. Well, you should in retirement as well.
That's I never thought of it like that. Yeah, I'm getting off the plane. Duh.
Yeah, really. The 5%, what about, I mean, who would have thought a pandemic could occur that changes things? Is that a 5% idea?
The political discourse in America, is that a 5%? Or living an extra 5 to 10 years longer? Or think about this. If I'd asked you in 2019, Phyllis, would we see a 6% and a 7% rate of inflation in 21 and 2022? My numbers may be off a little bit. You would have said what to that? Bull expletive, right? We said, no way. There's no way. But look, there we are in 2021 and 2022. Yeah. And the same thing's happening in 2030.
Yeah, the pandemic is the biggest thing. I mean, things you could never expect to happen could happen. And that's the 5%. And let me ask you, is the advisor going to give them back the money? Oh, I'm so sorry that happened. Let me write you a check because you lived longer than I planned for.
They're not running in with a big bag of money.
No, they're not. They're not.
I like that for
buying them dinner then.
I like that for 4. Holistic planning. Have a plan you can hold in your hand. If you don't have one, you should probably reconsider who you're working with. Number 5, 100%. Simple. What's one of Warren Buffett's rules, Phyllis?
If you don't understand it, don't do it.
So that's the problem. Some of these statements can be 30, 50 pages. A prospectus. You know what? Most people have maybe 10 to 20 mutual funds in their portfors. No one's going to read 20 different prospectuses that are all 30 to 50 pages. And to me, the SEC, years ago, they said to the big institutions, you got to disclose fees to the consumer. What they didn't tell them was how to disclose fees to the consumer. Thus, right, the prospectus was born. So the way I look at it, if you don't have a plan you can hold in your hand, that's a red flag. If you don't know your fees, that's a red flag. And you got to double check with your advisor because they may be just telling you what their fees are as opposed to the fund's fees too. If you don't know,
that's a shame.
Exactly. It's a dang shame, right? It's horrible. If you don't have a comprehensive income plan, if you don't know the risk in your portfolio, or you're not even sure if your advisor is a fiduciary or if they're even focused on the distribution phase, that is a red flag. And you may want to seriously reconsider who you're working with, right? Want to keep
let me add this to it. Okay. Please. Simple, on the front end, as we're beginning a relationship with someone, we got to meet a lot of times. We got to understand them. They got to understand us, but when it's all distilled down, we should be able to play. We do play. This is your life on one page. You've done the heavy lifting. You've saved the money. Once we understand where the money is and what we needed to do on one page, simple columns of anything you need to know in one page. This is your life, and then monitor that.
How many pages?
Finance. One.
I like that. Just keeping it easy. Now, with what also from a planning standpoint, there's a lot of advertisements on TV, social media, banner ads, all that stuff. How advisors get paid, and we wanted to talk about this because there's a lot of misconceptions with this, and it's very simple. There's 3 ways advisors get paid. Now, the first way is fee only. I'd go to Phillis. I'd say, Phillis, make me a plan, but I want to execute it on my own.
Yeah, let me just say this. I could do that, and I could probably charge a hefty fee after all the years in the industry since you pointed that out. But really, I want to be impactful. I want to get this person to and through retirement. And I really don't want to do that, because if I tell somebody to do 10 things and they do 3 of them, or they do 7 of them, and they don't make it because of that, I feel bad. They feel bad. And they probably blame me. So I don't know. We could do that, but that's not my favorite way to get paid.
That can be one of the trickier ways too, because you can ensure the success of that plan. Now, for someone who likes to, maybe have a little bit more control or influence over their investment portfolio, you can do that. But the tough question I always ask someone is, do you trust yourself with absolute certainty to make all the right decisions and get yourself to and through retirement? If you do, the first one could work great for you.
Yeah, I mean, in certain cases, I would do it. I think the advisor needs to be able to have the capacity to do that if it's appropriate.
So that's the first way. What's the second way?
The second way is to get paid a fee on the percent. Oh, God.
Of the assets under management that you are helping with them, you charge a percentage fee. So there's exactly. So there's some advertisements on TV that talk about you do better when we do better. This is the type of planning or fee-based structure that they're talking about. Because Phyllis, if you are paying a 1% fee and you've got $500,000, how much money is that, right? It's $5 million. Now, if that portfolio grows to $600,000, that fee is now $6,000, right? So in that essence, you do better when they do better. What they have to say is that when you do worse, they do worse. In that, I would argue you are paying an advisor more times than not, especially when you're in retirement, to not lose money. You still want to grow, obviously, but to not lose money, to preserve those assets and keep yourself safe. And that's the second way, which, this is a good strategy in that, you could build a portfolio with an advisor. They figure out your risk profile, your objectives, what your goals are, maybe if you want to generate income. So this is a type of planning strategy that can also make a lot of sense for someone who wants the advisor to kind of drive the car a little bit more than they want to drive it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That has a place in the portfolio as long as all the holistic planning is part of it. If it's just about, and that's how it's advertised, just about the investments performing well, then you're still in the accumulation phase. That fee should be for the holistic planning as well, not just about performance, but more importantly, doing all the other holistic planning around it.
And I would argue, for someone who's, younger like me, having an advisor in your 30s and 40s and 20s, it's not as important. Sometimes paying those extra fees could maybe be potentially a little bit of a handicap to the investment strategy, in that the objective isn't difficult. Put as much money as you can put into it. Don't treat it like a bank. Put it in the market. And when you get a pay raise, don't give yourself that raise, put it in your investment portfolio. It's as simple as that. But when you're in this retirement phase, building a portfolio with what are called non-correlated assets, all those different things where you're protecting and preserving risk, that's where I think an advisor proves their value and worth, and that they're helping you to stay preserved and to stay secure.
Yeah, absolutely. Just, making sure you have right risk tolerance is essential, and protecting everything around it. Yeah.
So number 3, commission-based investment tools. And there's a lot of people who will maybe speak ill on these or talk trash. And I think there is definitely a time and a place for these investments.
Oh, absolutely. I could rant on this one, Jordan. I promise I won't. Right.
How about we do right now?
Well, you want me to, I will. I think it really hurts people more with this damn BS that, oh my goodness, the advisor's getting paid a commission up front and it's a lot of money and that's why they're offering it. Well, if you're thinking that that's even a remote possibility, come on, you're too smart for this. Don't be working with that. But when you're really putting together a plan, planning for the worst, hoping for the best, getting things within the right case scenario, oftentimes these commission paid products are the best solution for you in your situation. The idea is to have someone who shows you that.
Well, let's for a second think about this. Let's not think about the fact that they are commission-based products. Let's think about what the objectives of the investment tools are. So as an example, an annuity could make a lot of sense for people. They're safe. They can protect your downside. They can help you potentially outpace inflation. They could generate income for life. Life insurance, that could be a tool you use in conjunction with Roth IRAs to do tax conversions. That can help you with, estate planning. That can help you with, lawsuit protection and liability, things like that. Those can make a lot of sense. So to me, I think where the danger zone is, if the advisor that you're working with doesn't have the ability to work in all three of these different types of environments.
That's exactly 100% correct. They have one hand tied behind their back in a time when they need every tool for every different situation.
Cool.
Absolutely.
I like that. Phil, till next time. How about this, folks? For those of you who are watching and enjoying, if you'd like more content just like this, make sure you all subscribe so that you can get this content regularly. Also, if you have any ideas, give us a comment in the chat below. Let us know what you think, and we will see you next time. Thank you.
You've been listening to the RPU podcast with Jordan Schwartz and Phillis Polvinas.